my name is Tom Mitchell. I'm 45 years old, and after 2 decades of chasing down criminals in a big city, I thought moving to Pine Valley, a quiet little town tucked between pine forests and lazy rivers, would finally bring me some peace. I'd only been here a few weeks, still learning the rhythm of the place, still blending in with the neighbors. That day I wasn't wearing my uniform. Just jeans, boots, a flannel shirt, and my old service weapon resting legally on my hip, same as always. I was walking through the local grocery store, picking up coffee and bread, when I heard a high-pitched shriek slicing through the calm. A woman's voice. Gun gun. Someone called the police. Shoppers froze. A few ducked. And then I saw her, Karen Thompson, the self-appointed watchdog of the neighborhood, glaring at me like I was an outlaw. She clutched her phone already, threatening to dial 911. The irony. She had no idea that if she made that call, I'm the one who would be answering it. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. When the last siren of my city years faded from my ears, I imagined silence would feel like a luxury, the kind you unwrap, slowly set on the shelf, and admire. Pine Valley was that kind of silence, at first glance, a quilt of cedar roofs and white porches stitched along 2-lane roads, church bells on Sundays, a diner that still wrote orders on carbon paper. Folks waved from pickup trucks even if they didn't know your name yet. The rivers moved like someone set them to a sleepy metronome. After 20 years, chasing heat meth labs, midnight stakeouts, courtroom grudges that never cooled, I was ready for cool. The timing worked in my favor. Sheriff Albert Burt Harrelson, a legend around here in the quiet, well-worn way legends exist in small towns, had decided to finally hand in his badge. He said he wanted to fish more and fight less, and he looked me in the eye the day I interviewed and said, "Tom, Pine Valley ain't complicated until someone decides to make it." A month later, the county board voted. Bert slapped a palm on my shoulder, and Pine Valley shook my hand in that long, 2-pump grip that says, "We're trusting you with our peace." I didn't move into the old sheriff's house. That felt like wearing another man's boots. Instead, I found a modest place on Juniper Lane, cedar siding, sloped roof, a porch that asked for coffee at sunrise. The subdivision had an HOA, neat hedges, mailbox heights, garbage can choreography. After the city, the rules felt almost cute, like stickers you give to children so they remember which cubby is theirs. Then the first newsletter arrived. The HOA newsletter was 12 pages long and read like a traffic citation, married a gossip column. Friendly reminders about Halloween decor timelines sat next to mandatory notices about lawn aeration and urgent alerts that someone's teen had left a skateboard on a sidewalk for 14 minutes. There were exclamation points where no sensible English sentence should ever permit them. At the bottom was a block signature, Karen Thompson, acting neighborhood watch compliance liaison pro tem. I'd met 100 Karens in the city and 100 non-Karens, with the same spirit, the gravitational pull of control. But small towns have a way of magnifying personalities, like magnifying glasses over paper. One hot beam and the edge starts to smoke. Karen moved in 3 months before me, straight from a city high-rise, where rumors said she managed a condo board like Napoleon in yoga pants. A 40-something whirlwind with a silver bob, rigid posture, and the kind of smile that always looked like it was holding a receipt. Within days, she'd started a group chat titled Eyes on Pine Valley, complete with whistle emojis and weekly drills for suspicious packages. She pinned articles about suburban crime waves, quoted statutes out of context, and treated speed bumps like frontier forts. 3 doors down from me, Mrs. Davenport, a widow with jam jars on every sill, told me in a whisper that Karen once scolded a bluebird feeder for violating birdseed spillage best practices. I could have introduced myself as sheriff on day 1. It would have saved some confusion, but anonymity is a rare teacher, and I wanted to learn the town's heartbeat. People act different when the badge enters a room, even when the badge is polite. They edit their stories, they tighten their jokes, they pretend not to carry grudges. I wanted the real stories, the unvarnished coffee counter conversation. So I left the uniform on its hanger when I wasn't on duty. I wore jeans, boots, that soft flannel I can't quit. I jogged the creek path at dawn, bought pie slices from the church bake sale, lost $1 at Tuesday, bingo to a woman with a laugh like a screen door. At the office, I found a staff with good instincts and the kind of humor that keeps a person sane. Deputy Elena Rodriguez knew every family tree by memory and could tell you which uncle to call to cool a feud before it hit a 911 dispatcher. Deputy Will Chen had a chess player's patience and a paramedic's hands steady when it counted. We spent the first weeks in the pattern of rural policing, loose livestock, loud engines, property lines that moved like ghost fences. The biggest excitement was a runaway goat that walked itself into the post office and tried to eat the forever stamps. Still, every place has a seam, and Pine Valley's ran right through the HOA gate. Rules are fine until someone wields them like a badge they didn't earn. Karen wielded. She corrected porch light wattages with the zeal of a power auditor, measured grass with a ruler, and left violation slips on garden gnomes. The HOA board, nice folks, mostly retired teachers, and an accountant with a smile that apologized for everything, hadn't exactly appointed her. Karen appointed herself. She brought clipboards to block parties. I stayed the course. Smile, shake hands, be neighborly. My service weapon stayed on me, holstered as the law allows, the same way I carried it through 2 decades of unpredictability. Off-duty or not, I've never liked the idea of borrowing luck. In our state, open carry is legal for anyone who's not disqualified. For law enforcement, on or off duty, it's a professional constant. In cities, people barely notice unless they're looking for trouble. In small towns, they notice, but most understand. You explain once you move on. I figured Pine Valley would be the same. A week after the newsletter, a bright orange flyer appeared on my door. Safety Awareness Meeting Tonight, Topic Weapons in Residential Zones. At the bottom, hosted by Karen Thompson, Neighborhood Watch. I went. I sat in the back with a paper cup of lemonade and listened to Karen outline a vision in which the HOA could, through collective, will regulate dangerous optics, by which she meant the mere sight of a holstered firearm on private property or in public spaces. She had a slide deck. She cited statutes that had nothing to do with our state or our century. When Q&A opened, I could have stood up, said, "Ma'am, you're misinformed," and ended the conversation in 5 minutes. But sometimes the better lesson is revealed gently at human speed on neutral ground. I asked 2 questions about how she envisioned conflict resolution. She answered both with the words firmly and immediately. I thanked her for looking out for the neighborhood and left. Rodriguez texted me 3 minutes later, "Boss, that was something." I replied, "Let's not make a thing out of it." Folks find their balance eventually. Balance is an optimist's word. 2 mornings later, I saw Karen in a reflective vest pacing the cul-de-sac like a mall security guard doing laps. She nodded at me briskly, then at my hip, and pursed her lips like a judge about to sentence. I nodded back and kept walking. A cat in a window judged us both. All of that is to say, by the time I walked into the grocery store on Maple and 3rd, the day of the shriek, the town had mostly decided I was the quiet new neighbor who waved kindly, helped carry bags to Mrs. Davenport's trunk, and never parked a tire on the sidewalk. Karen had decided something else. She'd constructed a story in which danger wore my flannel and my holster, and she had cast herself as the last line of defense. It is astonishing how quickly a story, one person's story, can sprint ahead of the facts. The facts were simple: legal carry, lawful presence, a sheriff off duty, buying coffee and bread. But the story Karen preferred was louder, brighter, a flashing ticker across her phone screen, armed man in neighborhood store. Some people choose stories because they make them feel useful. Some choose them because fear is a type of power. So when her voice sliced the calm, gun the room obeyed the story. Heads turned. A cart rolled into a display of oranges. Fruit thudded across tile like soft gavel knocks. Somewhere behind me, a manager called for someone named Chad. I raised my hands a little, palms open, the way you do when you've already measured the arc of what's coming, and decided to meet it with patience, not heat. And I thought almost kindly, if she calls 911, I know exactly who'll pick up. I know the questions the dispatcher will ask, the tone in the deputies' voices when the call pings their MDTs. I know the difference between noise and danger. I know the law. What Karen didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the law and I have been on a first-name basis for a long, long time. The thing about panic is that it spreads faster than truth. By the time Karen's shrill voice ricocheted off the canned goods aisle and into the produce section, 3 shoppers had already abandoned their carts. One mother pulled her toddler behind a display of cereal boxes, and a stock boy froze, mid-step, holding a box of paper towels. To them, the words gun were enough. Context and law rarely keep up with adrenaline. I turned slowly, deliberately, the way you learn to move after 20 years wearing a badge. Hands away from the weapon posture, calm eyes level. "Ma'am," I said, "everything's under control. I'm legally carrying this firearm." That should have been the end of it. For most reasonable people, that explanation, spoken in a calm baritone, would have drained the tension from the room like a faucet letting out pressure. But Karen Thompson was not most people. Her eyes widened further, her phone clutched like a holy relic. "Legally? You think carrying a deadly weapon into a family store is legal? This is Pine Valley, not some war zone." She pointed at me as though her finger were a spear of justice. Someone called the police. Now, a teenager near the checkout muttered, "Lady, we are allowed to open carry," but Karen whirled on him so fast he shut his mouth and retreated. I kept my voice steady. "Ma'am, I understand you're startled, but I am within my rights. State law permits open carry. No one here is in danger." But reasoning with someone who already thinks she's the hero of a movie never works. To Karen, I wasn't Tom Mitchell, a middle-aged guy buying bread. I was the villain, the armed stranger whose mere presence justified her performance. The store manager, a man named Clyde, whose polo shirt was stretched tight over his belly, shuffled nervously closer. "Sir," he whispered, "maybe you could cover it up. Just for now. Folks are getting nervous." I shook my head gently. "I'm not doing anything illegal, Clyde. Don't worry. This will settle down." It didn't. Karen took a step closer, waving her phone in the air. "If management won't do anything, then I will. You," she pointed at an elderly man by the bakery counter. "Call 911. Tell them an armed man is threatening the store." The man looked bewildered. "Threatening? He's just standing there." Karen's voice leapt another octave. "He has a gun. That is a threat. Every second we wait could be our last." Now more people were whispering, some pulling out their own phones, half to record and half to dial. The aisle became a stage, and Karen was milking it for every gasp. I sighed inwardly. "Ma'am," I said again, slower this time, "I am not threatening anyone. I'm a law-abiding resident. If you call the police, they'll tell you the same thing." That earned me a bark of laughter from her. "Oh really, we'll just see about that. When they come, you'll be in handcuffs, and this community will thank me for keeping them safe." Her thumb jabbed the phone screen. I could hear the faint chirp of the 911 operator answering. "Hello, yes. There's an armed man in the Pine Valley Market. He's waving a gun around, intimidating everyone." "Yes, right now," I raised an eyebrow. Waving, intimidating. My hands were open, visible, nowhere near the holster. Karen wasn't reporting. She was performing. I wanted to step in to correct her in real time, but a part of me, the weary, ironic part that had seen this dance before, knew it was better to let the call run its course. Sometimes the best teacher is reality itself. While she spoke, two employees whispered to each other near the frozen foods. One of them, a young woman with freckles, caught my eye and mouthed, "Aren't you the new sheriff?" I lifted a finger to my lips. No need to spoil the surprise yet. Karen, meanwhile, was pacing like a prosecuting attorney. "Yes, send officers immediately. He's armed and dangerous. I demand you arrest him before someone gets hurt." She ended the call with a flourish, tucking the phone under her chin and glaring at me triumphantly. "You're finished. They're on their way. You better get on the ground before they get here." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. She wanted me to lie face down on the sticky linoleum between the candy aisle and the discount shelf. "Ma'am," I said softly, "that won't be necessary." "It will be necessary," she snapped. "Do as I say, or I'll add resisting arrest to the charges." That drew a snort from somewhere in the crowd. Someone whispered, "She thinks she's a cop now." Karen swung around. Silence. "This is a matter of public safety." I rubbed a hand across my chin, pretending to consider. Part of me felt irritation creeping in. False reports, waste valuable resources, and hysteria can get someone hurt. But another part, the storyteller inside me, recognized the scene unfolding. This was Karen's grand debut as Pine Valley's self-proclaimed enforcer, and she had chosen the wrong co-star. I let out a slow breath, centering myself. My badge was tucked safely in my wallet. The truth was only a gesture away. But truth, I knew, had to wait. The lesson wouldn't stick if I cut the act short. So I stood calm as ever while Karen strutted in her imagined authority. On the ground, she barked again. Now, don't make me repeat myself. Instead of obeying, I tilted my head slightly, a half-smile curling on my lips. "You're certain about this course of action?" Her chin lifted proudly. "Absolutely. I know the law. I've studied it. And I'm not afraid to act when everyone else is too scared." Behind her, Mrs. Davenport peeked out from behind a display of canned beans. Her eyes met mine wide with both worry and amusement. I gave her the faintest wink. The moment stretched, shoppers holding their breath, Karen radiating righteous fury, me patient as a stone. And then somewhere in the distance, the faint wail of approaching sirens. Karen's face lit up with triumph. "Hear that? That's justice coming for you." Little did she know, justice was already standing in front of her, wearing flannel and boots, holding a loaf of bread in one hand, and more patience than she deserved in the other. The deputies were about to arrive, and with them the curtain would rise on Act 2 of this absurd little play. But for now, Pine Valley Market belonged to Karen's voice, and my silence, and to the crowd of neighbors, who were learning perhaps for the first time just how far a single scream could stretch the truth. Sirens in a small town carry a different weight than in the city. In the city, they're background noise stitched into the fabric of traffic jams and midnight alleys. In Pine Valley, when a siren wails, people stop stirring sugar into their coffee. They look up from porches, lean out of shop doors, and wonder which neighbor might be in trouble. That afternoon, when Karen's triumphant shriek of, "They're coming for you," was answered by the rising howl of squad cars, Pine Valley Market held its breath. I stayed where I was, the loaf of bread still in my hand. Karen paced in front of me like a conductor leading an orchestra only she could hear. Her phone camera was now angled directly at my face, recording every second. "You see this," she announced to the rows of canned vegetables and the unlucky shoppers still trapped in her drama. "This is what it looks like when a vigilante gets caught. Proof evidence." I could have told her the video would never hold up as evidence that her narration was already laced with false statements, but I didn't. Instead, I folded the bread neatly under my arm, a man waiting in line rather than a man under siege. The sirens grew louder, and with them, Karen's certainty. On the ground, she barked again. "You don't want to make it worse for yourself." I tilted my head. "Ma'am, I'm not making anything worse. You are." That only made her double down. "Listen to me. This is my neighborhood. I know what's best for it. And you," her finger jabbed the air, "you're a danger." Her phone screen reflected the red and blue lights that spilled across the storefront windows as the patrol cars screeched to a halt. Tires bit into gravel. Doors slammed. The crowd pressed back against the aisles, a human tide retreating to make room for what was coming. Through the glass, I saw the familiar silhouettes of Deputy Elena Rodriguez and Deputy Will Chen moving quickly but cautiously, hands hovering near their holsters. They were professionals, even when responding to a call they already suspected was exaggerated. Their eyes swept the store, scanning for threats. When they saw me, our gazes locked. Elena's brow lifted a flash of recognition, then amusement. Chen's lips twitched like he was fighting a smile. Karen, however, interpreted their arrival as the cavalry. She spun toward them, waving both arms. "Officers, over here, that's him, arrest him immediately." Elena and Chen slowed their steps, keeping their expressions neutral. Elena asked the standard line voice, "Steady, ma'am. Can you tell us exactly what happened?" Karen launched into her performance with the flair of a Broadway actress. "I was shopping peacefully when this stranger, pulled out a firearm and began intimidating everyone. He refuses to comply with my orders to disarm and is clearly a threat to public safety." Behind her, 3 people audibly snorted. One man muttered, "He's just buying bread," but Karen snapped her head around so fast he went quiet again. Elena nodded, pen poised over her notepad. "And did he point the firearm at anyone?" Make verbal threats. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. The truth was inconvenient. Well, not exactly, she admitted, but the presence of a gun is a threat. Everyone knows that. HOA bylaws specifically prohibit dangerous objects in shared spaces. He's violating community safety rules. Chen glanced at me, then back at her. "HOA bylaws aren't criminal statutes, ma'am." Karen's face flushed crimson. "I don't care what they're called. Laws are laws, and he's breaking them." I stayed silent, giving her more rope. Elena scribbled something that was definitely not notes, probably doodles, to hide her grin. Chen's radio crackled softly at his belt dispatch, waiting for confirmation. Karen jabbed her finger toward me again. "You need to get him on the ground right now. Cuff him. Do your job." For a moment the deputies hesitated, not because they believed her, but because they were reading me. My small hand signal, 2 fingers tapping lightly on my thigh, was clear enough play along. So Elena cleared her throat. "Sir, can we see some identification?" I nodded, keeping the charade alive. I reached slowly into my back pocket, pulling out my wallet, and handed over a driver's license. Elena studied it carefully, biting the inside of her cheek to keep her expression flat. Karen clapped her hands together. "Yes, finally, justice in action. Make sure to confiscate the weapon." Rodriguez passed the license back. "We'll verify your identity in just a moment, sir." She tapped her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Running a subject for confirmation." Karen leaned closer, whispering conspiratorially, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't worry, you'll be safe soon. These officers are trained to deal with people like him." I arched an eyebrow. "People like me." Karen didn't hesitate. "Gun nuts, wannabe cowboys, men who think strutting around with weapons makes them important." "Well, not in my neighborhood," the crowd murmured. A woman whispered, "He's not a cowboy, he's..." then trailed off as I raised a finger to my lips again. The absurdity was reaching its crescendo. Karen's phone was still recording, capturing her own overconfidence for posterity. Her voice grew shriller, commanding. Cuff him, put him in the back of your car, make an example so others know this town won't tolerate guns. Chen's jaw tightened, his eyes sparkling with barely contained laughter. Elena gave the faintest shake of her head as if to say, she has no idea who she's talking to. I folded my arms across my chest, the loaf of bread still under one elbow, and said, "Ma'am, you're very sure of yourself." "Of course I am," Karen snapped. "Unlike you, I understand the law." That was the moment I decided to lean into the theater. Then let's see how well you understand it when reality knocks. Outside, another car pulled up, an unmarked cruiser carrying Sergeant Mills, who often oversaw shift rotations. His presence meant the situation was now officially escalating up the chain, even though none of it was necessary. The irony made me almost laugh aloud. A woman who didn't know the law had managed to summon half the county's law enforcement to a grocery store because of a holstered gun and a loaf of bread. And still, she believed she was right. Karen raised her phone high. "Everyone watching this will thank me. I've saved Pine Valley today. You're all witnesses." I let her declaration hang in the air. Let the crowd absorb the contrast between her theater and my quiet patience. The truth was only a heartbeat away, waiting on a dispatcher's voice through the radio, and when it came, it would hit her harder than any set of handcuffs ever could. There's a saying in law enforcement, sometimes the funniest thing you can do is nothing. Let the suspect, or in this case, the self-appointed vigilante, keep talking. The more rope they take, the tighter the knot gets. That was exactly what Karen Thompson was doing in the middle of Pine Valley Market, braiding her own noose out of arrogance, misinformation, and the false confidence of a smartphone camera. The deputies stood poised, notebooks in hand, trying to look serious. Karen mistook their restraint for obedience. She puffed up like a general reviewing troops. "You there," she barked at Deputy Chen. "Secure his weapon. It's a threat to public safety. Remove it immediately." Chen glanced at me. I gave the barest shrug. "Play along." His hand hovered near his belt, nowhere near my holster. "We'll take that under advisement, ma'am," he said carefully. Karen's nostrils flared. "Under advisement? This is an emergency." "Don't you know the concept of probable cause? I've watched enough Law and Order to know my rights. Citizens can make arrests when law enforcement fails." That line nearly broke Rodriguez. She coughed into her sleeve, shoulders shaking. Karen, oblivious, turned to the gathering crowd. "People of Pine Valley, you're witnessing history. For too long, outsiders have brought their city violence into our peaceful community. Not anymore. Today we take a stand." The irony nearly knocked me over. I was the one who'd spent 20 years pulling city violence off the streets like weeds from a sidewalk. I was the reason a dozen families could walk home safe at night. Yet, here I was, painted as the villain in Karen's stage play. An older man with suspenders raised a tentative hand. Ma'am, I know this fella. He's..." Karen cut him off with a slash of her palm. "No interruptions. We can't let sympathy cloud judgment. That's how communities get destroyed." The poor man muttered, "Communities usually get destroyed by gossip," but he shrank back under her glare. I decided to add a little fuel to the comedy. "So I ask, keeping my tone light, you're placing me under citizen's arrest." Karen straightened, proud as a school principal. "Correct. Until proper law enforcement removes you, you're under my authority." "Your authority," I repeated, suppressing a grin. "That's right. As acting neighborhood watch captain, I have both the right and responsibility." She gestured with her phone like it was a judge's gavel. "Everyone here can attest. I gave him clear orders to disarm, to lay down on the ground, and he refused. That's resisting arrest. A felony." Gasps and giggles rippled through the crowd. Rodriguez scribbled furiously, though I could tell from the tilt of her pen that she was doodling caricatures of Karen, not notes. Karen mistook the sound for admiration. "You all see, this is how justice is done when cowards stay silent. I will not allow Pine Valley to turn into another lawless suburb." I cleared my throat. "Ma'am, do you know the difference between HOA bylaws and state statutes?" Her chin jutted. "Of course I do. HOA rules are binding. If the community agrees, they're as strong as law. My brother-in-law is a lawyer, you know." I leaned slightly toward the deputies. "Ah, the classic brother-in-law defense," Chen almost choked. He turned it into a cough, but a few people chuckled outright. Karen pressed on louder, trying to drown out the laughter. "The HOA prohibits visible, dangerous items. That includes firearms. Ergo, he is in violation. Ergo, he is subject to community sanction. Ergo," she paused dramatically, "he's going to jail." The syllogism was so broken it belonged in a circus. I couldn't resist. "Ma'am, I think you skipped a few steps between HOA fines and felony prison sentences." She ignored me, spinning toward Rodriguez. Officer, place him in cuffs. We can't have this man terrorizing decent families. Rodriguez put her pen down with theatrical care. Ma'am, before we escalate, we need to establish whether any crime occurred. HOA violations don't fall under criminal code. Karen's eyes blazed. Are you saying my safety doesn't matter? That his gun doesn't count? You swore an oath to protect us, Rodriguez replied gently. We swore an oath to uphold the law. That distinction landed like a pebble in a pond, quiet but rippling. A few neighbors nodded thoughtfully. One whispered, she's gone too far this time. Karen doubled down, waving her phone at them like a torch. Don't be fooled, he's dangerous. He could snap at any second. Why else would a man carry a gun into a store? I raised the loaf of bread. To buy groceries mostly. Laughter erupted. Even Clyde, the manager, sweating buckets, let out a nervous chuckle. Karen's face flushed, beet red. You think this is funny? Guns kill people every day. And you, she jabbed her finger at me, you think you're above the law. I let the silence hang a moment, then said evenly, no ma'am, I am the law. The crowd tittered again, though Karen missed the weight of the words. Instead, she launched into a speech about how she had attended a weekend seminar on civic empowerment in the city, how she had printed out sections of statutes. She didn't understand how she carried laminated citizen rights cards in her purse. She even pulled one out, waving it triumphantly. This card authorizes me to act when law enforcement is ineffective. The deputies exchanged looks. Chen mouthed silently authorizes, and Rodriguez nearly lost it. Meanwhile, Karen strutted like she was deputizing herself in front of the entire store. This is bigger than one man with a gun. This is about protecting our families, our children, our very way of life. I refuse to be silent while thugs parade their weapons in front of us. At thugs, a middle-aged woman near the bakery actually gasped. That's Tom Mitchell, she whispered to her husband. The nicest man I've met since moving here. But Karen was on a roll, blind to the shifting crowd. Mark my words, today will be remembered as the day Pine Valley drew a line in the sand. I couldn't resist anymore. Funny thing about sand, ma'am, it tends to blow away with the wind. That earned a chorus of chuckles. Karen stomped her foot like a toddler denied candy. Enough, officers, this man is mocking the law. Do your duty, Rodriguez folded her arms. We are doing our duty. We're gathering facts. Karen shook her head violently. Facts. The facts are right in front of you. He has a gun. Case closed, I sighed, looking at the deputies. It's clear we're at an impasse. Chen nodded solemnly. Guess we'll have to wait for dispatch to confirm identity. Karen clapped again, delighted. Yes, run his name. You'll see the kind of criminal we're dealing with. The crowd, now fully entertained, leaned in closer. Phones recorded from multiple angles. The absurdity had reached Shakespearean levels. Me, the actual sheriff, accused of terrorism in front of my deputies, while holding nothing more dangerous than a loaf of sourdough. I met Rodriguez's eyes and gave the tiniest nod. Time for the curtain to rise on the next act. Because sooner or later, reality has a way of crashing into delusion. And Karen's carefully constructed fantasy was about to meet a dispatcher who knew my voice better than my barber. The sound of radios and boots on linoleum always carries a gravity, even when the situation is laughable. By the time the second wave of officers pushed through the sliding glass doors of Pine Valley Market, the place felt less like a grocery store and more like a stage set. The fluorescent lights, hummed carts, sat abandoned in aisles, oranges still rolled loose across the floor from the earlier commotion. And in the center of it all, Karen Thompson stood tall with her phone outstretched like a microphone, convinced she was leading the community to victory. Deputy Elena Rodriguez and Deputy Will Chen already had the scene in hand, or at least they had it under control, if you can call holding in laughter control. But when Sergeant Mills walked in, flanked by Officer Grant, things got interesting. Mills was old-school, wide-frame gray hair, cropped close, a man who never wasted words. He surveyed the room with a kind of weariness, like he'd already lived through every version of this nonsense in his 30 years on the job. Karen immediately latched onto him. Sergeant, thank goodness you're here. These two, she pointed accusingly at Rodriguez, and Chen seemed reluctant to act. But you can see for yourself, can't you, armed man? Dangerous presence. I demand you arrest him immediately. Mills squinted at me, then at her. His eyes flicked down to my holstered weapon, then back up to my face. Recognition dawned quickly, followed by confusion. He opened his mouth to speak, but I gave a subtle shake of my head. Play along. He hesitated, then sighed. Ma'am, why don't you explain again what happened? Karen puffed up like a peacock. Gladly. I was shopping, minding my business, when she jabbed her finger at me, pulled a gun in the middle of the store, terrifying everyone. He refused my orders to lay down his weapon and submit to a citizen's arrest. He is clearly unstable, possibly violent, and must be removed for the safety of the community." "Is that so?" Mills asked, his tone flat. "Yes, I caught everything on video. Solid evidence." She waved her phone, making sure everyone saw the blinking red recording light. "This is Pine Valley history in the making. Justice will prevail." Behind her, Rodriguez's shoulders shook with suppressed laughter. Chen bit his lip, eyes watering. Even Grant, new to the force, couldn't stop the corner of his mouth from twitching upward. Karen mistook the silence for solemn agreement. "Well, what are you waiting for? Secure his weapon, cuff him, and haul him out of here." Mills rubbed a hand over his face. "Ma'am, before we go slapping cuffs on people, we need to establish probable cause." "Did he point the firearm at anyone?" Karen blinked. "No, but the presence of the firearm is the threat." "Did he make verbal threats?" "No, but he mocked me, which shows dangerous intent." That almost did it. Half the crowd burst into muffled laughter. Karen spun around, scowling. "This isn't funny. This is life and death." I shifted the loaf of bread from one arm to the other and said mildly, "Whole wheat or sourdough, ma'am? That's the only life and death decision I made today." The room erupted in chuckles. Karen's face turned scarlet. She spun back to Mills. "Are you going to tolerate this insubordination? Citizens have rights. I initiated a lawful arrest and he resisted. That's obstruction." Mills tilted his head deadpan. "So you're saying you placed this man under arrest?" "Yes, I have the authority." HOA bylaws state. "HOA bylaws aren't criminal law, ma'am," Mills interrupted. "They cover fence heights and paint colors. They don't authorize you to arrest anybody." Karen's jaw dropped. That's not true. I've studied the statutes." Grant muttered under his breath. "From Wikipedia, maybe." Karen whirled on him. "What was that? Nothing, ma'am." Grant replied quickly, though his grin betrayed him. Meanwhile, dispatch crackled through Chen's radio. "Unit 12 confirmed subject's identity. Name provided, Rodriguez keyed up. Copy. Stand by." She turned to me, holding out the radio like a prop. I met her gaze, a smirk tugging my lips. "Ready when you are." Karen leaned in eagerly. Yes, run his name. You'll see what kind of criminal we're dealing with." Rodriguez pressed the button. "Dispatch, run a Tom Mitchell, 45 Pine Valley address, Juniper Lane." The response came almost instantly, the dispatcher's voice clear enough for everyone in the store to hear confirmed. "That's Sheriff Tom Mitchell, Pine Valley County." The room went silent. Then a ripple of laughter spread like wildfire. Phones lifted higher, capturing Karen's wide-eyed shock, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. But the reveal wasn't over yet. I reached calmly into my wallet, pulled out my badge, and held it up for all to see. The gold star caught the fluorescent light, gleaming like a spotlight on truth. Karen stammered. That can't be right. He's lying. That's a fake badge. You have to arrest him for impersonating an officer." Mills shook his head. "No, ma'am. He's my boss." The crowd broke into full-blown laughter now. Even Clyde, the manager, leaned against a shelf, wheezing. Mrs. Davenport clapped her hands like she'd just witnessed a magic trick. Karen's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and humiliation. She sputtered, "If he's really the sheriff, then why wasn't he in uniform? Why carry a gun openly, where children can see?" I tucked the badge back into my wallet and answered evenly, "Because the law allows it. Off-duty or on-duty, I carry legally. And in Pine Valley, I don't always wear the uniform. I prefer to meet my neighbors as a neighbor, not just as the sheriff." Karen shook her head, retreating a step, but the camera in her hand was still rolling. The evidence she thought would damn me was now her own public embarrassment. Rodriguez leaned toward her. "Ma'am, filing a false report is a serious matter. You claimed he threatened people, waved his weapon. That never happened." Karen's mouth worked, but no words came out. Chen added gently, "Maybe next time ask a question before you dial 911. The crowd applauded that. Some even whistled. Phones captured every angle, every priceless expression. I looked around at my neighbors, my deputies, the absurd circus of it all, and thought Pine Valley wasn't as quiet as I'd expected, but it was certainly never dull. There are moments in life where absurdity crests like a wave, so high, so ridiculous, you have no choice but to ride it. That's what part 7 of this little drama was, a tidal wave of nonsense, and Karen was surfing it proudly. "Don't be fooled," she shrieked, spinning in a slow circle, so her phone camera caught every face in the store. "This is a cover-up. They're all in on it. That badge was fake. I tell you, fake. He's trying to trick us into silence." The crowd, half amused and half exasperated, responded with a chorus of chuckles. Someone muttered, "Lady, he's literally the sheriff." Another added, "I saw him swear in at the county hall last month." Karen ignored them, her eyes wild, her fingers still trembling as she pointed at me. "Deputies, secure the weapon immediately." "This is my citizen's arrest, and you are obligated to assist," Rodriguez coughed into her sleeve, disguising a laugh. "Ma'am, we're obligated to assist the law, not HOA initiatives." That lit Karen's fuse. "HOA initiatives," she shouted. "This isn't about mailboxes and hedges. This is about public safety. If you refuse to act, then I will escalate this myself." "How exactly do you plan to escalate?" I asked, folding my arms. Her eyes gleamed with the manic energy of someone fully convinced of her own authority. "I hereby declare this man a danger to the community, and I order him." She stomped one sensible shoe on the floor for emphasis to submit to immediate restraint. I couldn't help it. I tilted my head, amused. "Restraint by who, ma'am? Yourself?" "Yes." She raised her phone higher. "I will document his every move. And when the county board sees this footage, they'll know exactly who endangered us all. I'll have you barred from public office. I'll have you banned from carrying weapons within HOA limits. I'll sound." The tirade was cut off when an older woman in the back called out, "Karen, sit down. You're embarrassing yourself." The crowd erupted in laughter. Even Sergeant Mills cracked the faintest grin. Karen turned crimson, but she doubled down. "Embarrassing. You'll thank me when he finally snaps. When she floundered, struggling to invent a crime I might plausibly commit while holding a loaf of bread. When he uses that weapon to intimidate children." At that, Mrs. Davenport's granddaughter giggled. "All he's intimidating is the gluten-free section." More laughter. Phones captured it all. Karen's fury only grew. "Deputy," she barked again, this time at Chen. "Cuff him. That is a direct order from a citizen exercising lawful rights." "You are bound to obey." Chen's composure cracked. He pressed a hand over his mouth, turned slightly away, and pretended to cough. His shoulders shook. Karen stomped closer to me. "You think this is funny? You think mocking the law is a joke? You are under arrest?" She thrust her phone toward my chest as if the camera itself had the power to detain me. I raised my hands theatrically. "All right, ma'am. Do I get to make a phone call, or is the HOA jail fully booked?" The room exploded in laughter. Even Clyde, the weary store manager, chuckled so hard his stomach shook. Karen spun in fury, addressing the crowd like a preacher at revival. "Shame on all of you laughing while a dangerous man flaunts a deadly weapon in your faces. Shame. If you had any decency, you'd support me. You'd demand his arrest, but the crowd wasn't with her anymore. They were with me. With common sense. With humor. They were tired of being bullied over bird feeders and lawn clippings. I decided to push it one step further. I slowly pulled out my wallet again, flipped it open, and held up my badge. This time I didn't say a word. I just let the gleaming star catch the fluorescent light while the laughter rolled on. Karen's voice cracked. "It's fake. I swear it's fake," Mills sighed. "Ma'am, that badge isn't fake. He's my commanding officer." The silence that followed was deafening until the crowd burst into another wave of laughter, louder this time, like a dam finally breaking. Karen's face crumpled between disbelief and desperation. "No, this can't be happening. You're all blind." Blind to the danger, I lowered the badge and spoke softly, almost kindly. "Ma'am, the only danger here is your imagination." She staggered back a step, her phone still recording though. Now her voice wavered. You set me up. You let me humiliate myself." I shrugged. "I didn't make you say anything. That was all you." The crowd nodded, murmuring agreement. Someone called out, "You should apologize to him, Karen." Another added, "Yeah, and to us, for ruining our shopping trip." Karen's chest heaved, her righteous certainty finally slipping into embarrassment. She lowered her phone, realizing the recording was no longer a trophy but a liability, and still, she couldn't quite surrender. "Even if you are the sheriff, you should have been in uniform. You should have warned us. You misled this entire neighborhood." I smiled faintly. "Sometimes, ma'am, the best way to learn the truth is when it sneaks up on you." That line hit harder than I expected. The crowd quieted, nodding slowly. Karen froze, caught between shame and stubbornness. The peak of absurdity had passed, but the lesson wasn't finished. That was still waiting for the dispatcher's voice, for the final confirmation, for the hammer of truth to fall one last time. Because in Pine Valley, absurdity might rise like a wave, but it always crashes against the shore of reality. And reality was about to drown Karen's fantasy once and for all. There's a rhythm to truth when it finally steps into a room. It doesn't shout, it doesn't flail. It simply arrives calm, steady, undeniable. And that's exactly what happened the moment dispatch's voice crackled loud and clear across Chen's radio. "Confirmed. That's Sheriff Tom Mitchell you're talking about." The words hung in the air like church bells on a Sunday morning, reverberating through the fluorescent aisles of Pine Valley Market. For a moment you could hear nothing else. No shuffling carts, no nervous coughs. Just silence followed by the sudden release of laughter bubbling up from the crowd. Karen froze her eyes wide. She blinked, then shook her head violently. No. No, no, no. That's wrong. Dispatch must have made a mistake. Rodriguez keyed her radio again, biting back a smile. Dispatch, can you confirm once more? Subject's name, Tom Mitchell. The reply came with the same calm certainty. Copy. Sheriff Mitchell. Pine Valley County. This time the laughter wasn't muffled. It rolled through the store like a wave. Clyde, the manager, leaned against a shelf holding his stomach. Mrs. Davenport was openly clapping. Even the teenager who'd been hiding by the cereal aisle shouted, "Told you he was the sheriff." Karen's face turned crimson. "No, you're all wrong. He tricked you. That badge is fake. I've seen fake badges on Amazon for $20. I finally stepped forward, pulling my wallet from my pocket. Slowly, I flipped it open and held up the gold star for all to see. Not from Amazon, ma'am. Issued by the governor's office. Signed, sealed, and sworn. Gasps, then applause. Cameras zoomed in. Every phone in the room captured the gleam of that badge. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, her certainty cracking. But if you're really the sheriff, why weren't you in uniform? Why didn't you say so sooner? I let the question linger, then answered calmly. Because I live here now, and off-duty I prefer to be a neighbor first. Not everyone needs to know who I am the second I walk in the room. The crowd nodded in agreement. Someone said, "Makes sense." Another added, "Wish more folks in authority acted normal like that." Karen, though, wasn't ready to give up. She waved her phone like a sword. "Even if you are the sheriff, you endangered this community. Children were in this store. They saw a gun." I tilted my head, keeping my tone even. "Children also see police officers every day with sidearms. Guns, ma'am, are tools. Dangerous when misused, yes. But in the right hands, they're a responsibility. And this one," I rested a hand on the holster, "has been at my side for over 20 years, in far worse places than Pine Valley." A murmur of respect rippled through the crowd. Karen's lip trembled. "You should have worn your uniform. Then I would have known." I smiled faintly. "If the only thing keeping you from calling the cops was a uniform, maybe the issue isn't the gun. Maybe it's how quickly you judge without asking questions." That line landed like a stone in still water. The laughter dimmed into thoughtful silence. Even some of Karen's staunchest nodding allies shifted uncomfortably, realizing the point. Rodriguez stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. "Ma'am, filing a false report is serious. You told dispatch he was waving the gun around threatening people. None of that happened. That could have gotten someone hurt," Chen added. "We responded with lights and sirens. Drivers pulled over, emergency resources got tied up. All because you jumped to conclusions." Karen's bravado cracked. I was protecting the community. "Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" No Mills said bluntly, arms crossed. "You're supposed to tell the truth. Protecting the community doesn't mean exaggerating facts until they fit your fears." The weight of his words pressed on her. She shifted from foot to foot, suddenly small in the circle of eyes and cameras. A teenager piped up from the back. So basically Karen tried to arrest the sheriff. The laughter returned louder this time, spilling over until even I chuckled. That's one way to put it. Karen spun toward me, desperate for footing. "You let this happen. You stood there and humiliated me." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't make you scream. I didn't make you call 911. I didn't make you invent crimes. You did all that on your own." Her phone sagged in her grip. The red recording light blinked mockingly. Every second of her rant, every self-declaration of authority was etched permanently into digital memory. By tomorrow, Pine Valley would be passing clips around like trading cards. Still, she tried one last gasp of control. "This isn't over. I'll take this to the HOA board. They'll back me up. They'll see you're reckless and they'll demand accountability." From the back, a voice shouted, "The board's tired of your nonsense, Karen." Another added, "Yeah, we came here for milk, not your soap opera." The crowd chuckled again, the spell fully broken. Karen's authority dissolved in the laughter. I took one slow step forward, lowering my voice so only she and the deputies could hear. "Ma'am, you wanted to teach me a lesson, but I think maybe you're the one who learned today." Her eyes flickered anger, then fear, then something softer like the first tremor of shame. She turned, clutching her phone like a lifeline, and stormed toward the exit. As the sliding doors whooshed shut behind her, the entire store exhaled. Conversations broke out. Laughter echoed. Neighbors patted my shoulder, some thanking me, others just shaking their heads in disbelief. Rodriguez leaned close, whispering, "Boss, that was legendary." Chen grinned. She's never living this down. I tucked the badge away, set the bread back into my cart, and said simply, "All right, folks, show's over. Let's let Clyde get back to his oranges." The crowd dispersed slowly, still buzzing, still laughing, the story already spinning into legend. But as for Karen, her legend was crumbling one shaky step at a time. Truth is a stubborn thing. You can argue with it, deny it, shout at it, but in the end, it stands there unmoved. By the time Karen re-entered the store, yes, she had stormed out only to return 30 seconds later because her car keys were still in her shopping basket. The truth was waiting for her like a patient judge. The crowd parted slightly as she stomped back in cheeks, flushed eyes darting at the phone still recording. She snatched her keys from the cart, then realized everyone was still watching, still laughing under their breath. And there I was, calm as a stone badge glinting faintly in my hand. "Fine," she snapped, jabbing a finger at me again. "Maybe you are the sheriff. But you misled me. You endangered people by hiding who you are. If you'd just worn your uniform, none of this would have happened." The room went quiet, waiting for my response. I took a step forward, voice steady, carrying the weight of experience. "Ma'am, the law doesn't disappear when I take off the uniform. The badge isn't the authority, it's the oath behind it. I carry because it's my duty to protect whether I'm in uniform or not. That's not endangerment. That's responsibility." She faltered her eyes, darting to the crowd, hoping for support. None came. Even the ones who once whispered agreement with her were now silent, unwilling to be pulled into her fantasy. I continued softer now, the way you speak when you want someone to actually hear. "Karen, the problem isn't the gun. It's that you judged before asking a single question. You assumed danger where there was none. And in doing so, you created the very chaos you claimed to prevent." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. A man near the dairy aisle said, "He's right. She scared folks more than the gun ever did." Karen's face crumpled, the bravado slipping. I was trying to protect the community." Rodriguez stepped in, voice firm but not unkind. "Ma'am, calling in a false report can get people hurt. Officers respond fast sometimes with weapons drawn. You're lucky no one panicked harder." Chen added, "We put on sirens, lights, cleared traffic. Other emergencies could have been waiting. We can't waste resources on calls that aren't true." The words landed heavier than my own. Karen's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out. She turned to me again, voice trembling. "So what happens now? Are you going to arrest me?" The question silenced the room. Every eye turned to me. It would have been easy to press charges. False reporting. Disorderly conduct. Plenty of statutes fit. But Pine Valley wasn't the city. Out here, justice sometimes meant more than handcuffs. I shook my head slowly. "No, ma'am. I'm not going to arrest you. I'm going to ask you to think. Next time, before you dial 911, before you shout, before you spread fear, ask yourself if you know the facts. Ask yourself if what you're doing will calm the fire or pour gasoline on it." Her lips trembled, but she nodded faintly. For the first time all afternoon, she looked less like a self-appointed general and more like a neighbor caught in her own reflection. From the back, someone shouted, "You should apologize." The crowd murmured agreement. Karen hesitated, then whispered, "I'm sorry." Louder, Mrs. Davenport called out. Karen swallowed, straightened her shoulders, and said more clearly, "I'm sorry. I overreacted." The crowd gave a soft round of applause, not mocking but relieved. Pine Valley had a way of smoothing even the roughest edges eventually. I nodded once. "Apology accepted. But don't apologize to me. Apologize to them. This is your community, too." Karen turned, scanning the faces of her neighbors, people she'd tried to control, lecture, intimidate. For once, she didn't see admiration in their eyes. She saw disappointment. And maybe, just maybe, a path to something better. Still, she couldn't resist one last flicker of defensiveness. "I just wanted to keep everyone safe," I answered gently. "Then start by learning the difference between fear and fact. One protects, the other harms." The lesson landed. You could feel it in the hush of the room. Finally, Sergeant Mills cleared his throat. "All right, folks. Nothing more to see here. Let's wrap it up before the ice cream melts." Laughter broke the tension. People began drifting back to their carts, chuckling, shaking their heads, already drafting the stories they'd tell their spouses at dinner. Phones slipped back into pockets. Pine Valley Market resumed its rhythm, though the echoes of what had just happened would live on for weeks. Rodriguez leaned close as we walked toward the checkout. "Boss, that was a masterclass. No charges, no yelling, just truth." Chen added, grinning. "And a free comedy show." I smiled faintly, setting my bread on the conveyor belt. Sometimes the best lessons don't need a courtroom. just a mirror. Behind us, Karen stood quietly, her phone dark now, her shoulders lower. For once, she didn't look like Pine Valley's self-proclaimed protector. She just looked human. And in a small town, that was sometimes the first step toward being a real neighbor. The store felt quieter after the storm had passed, as though Pine Valley Market itself had taken a deep breath and was finally exhaling. Carts creaked back into motion, parents coaxed children out from hiding, and Clyde the manager began sweeping up the oranges that had scattered during Karen's performance. The absurd theater was over. All that remained was the echo of laughter, the flicker of phone screens, and one humbled woman clutching her keys. Karen lingered by the door, unsure whether to slink away or face the music. Her phone, once a weapon in her crusade, now rested heavily in her hand like a stone she no longer knew how to throw. Neighbors avoided her gaze at first, but then one woman, a young mother with 2 kids, approached. "Karen," she said gently, "we all want to feel safe. But screaming doesn't make us safer. Listening does." That small kindness broke the ice. Karen's lips trembled and she nodded quickly, though her eyes glistened. She turned toward me, voice low. "Sheriff, I'm sorry. I judged too quickly. I let fear talk louder than reason." The crowd hushed, waiting. I studied her face, the tightness around her eyes, the stubborn lines of pride slowly softening. She wasn't evil, just misguided, blinded by her own need for control. I gave a single nod. "Apology accepted. But remember, ma'am, the next time you shout gun, someone could get hurt. Maybe not me, maybe not you, but panic spreads faster than truth. We can't afford that." She swallowed hard and whispered, "I'll remember." To ease the tension, I added, "Besides, if you ever really need help, I'd rather you call 911 for the right reasons. Not because a man was shopping for bread." Laughter rippled again. Even Karen smiled faintly, though her cheeks burned red. Later that week, I stood at the front of Pine Valley's community hall during our monthly meeting. The folding chairs squeaked under the weight of half the town, drawn in by the buzz of what had happened at the market. Karen sat in the front row, shoulders, stiff hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked like a student waiting to be graded. I cleared my throat. "Neighbors, I want to talk about what happened. Not to embarrass anyone, but to remind us all of something important. Fear can cloud judgment. Panic can turn neighbors into suspects. And assumptions." I paused, letting the silence work. "Assumptions can do more damage than truth ever could." I paced slowly, meeting their eyes. "Yes, I carry a weapon. Yes, I'm your sheriff, even when I'm in jeans instead of a uniform. But carrying responsibly is not the same as threatening. It's not the gun that decides right or wrong. It's the heart and the hands that wield it." Heads nodded around the room. Even Karen's posture softened. I continued, "The law exists for a reason. HOA bylaws are fine for lawns and fences, but they don't replace state statutes. You don't protect a community by inventing crimes where there are none. You protect it by knowing the truth, asking questions, and treating each other with respect." A murmur of agreement filled the hall. Someone clapped. Others followed. Karen hesitated, then slowly stood. Her voice shook, but she spoke loud enough for all to hear. "I was wrong. I let my fear speak for me. I thought I was helping, but all I did was spread panic. Sheriff Mitchell showed me the truth, calmly, kindly, and for that I'm grateful." The room broke into applause, not mocking this time, but supportive. Karen flushed, then smiled sheepishly. For once she wasn't the self-appointed captain barking orders. She was just a neighbor admitting a mistake. And in Pine Valley, that was worth more than any badge or bylaw. After the meeting, as people filtered out, Karen approached me. "Sheriff, if you'll have me, I'd like to volunteer for real community work. Not just patrolling porches. Maybe the food bank. Maybe helping the seniors." I smiled, extending my hand. "That's a better use of your energy, ma'am. Welcome aboard." She shook at her grip firmer than I expected. As the night drew to a close, I stood outside under the stars, listening to the quiet hum of Pine Valley. Moving here, I'd wanted peace. What I found was something better, a reminder that peace isn't just the absence of conflict. It's the presence of understanding. Karen had learned it the hard way. The town had learned it too, and so had I. Because the truth is simple, you can't build a safe community on fear. You build it on trust, patience, and the courage to wait for facts. And maybe, just maybe, on a little humor too. Life has a way of teaching us lessons in the most unexpected places, a grocery store aisle, a community meeting, or in the middle of a misunderstanding that nearly spirals out of control. What happened with Karen wasn't really about guns, uniforms, or HOA rules. It was about judgment, about how quickly we jump to conclusions when fear whispers louder than reason. I've worn a badge long enough to know that fear is contagious, but so is calm. When we pause, breathe, and seek truth before reacting, we save ourselves and our neighbors from needless harm. Karen thought she was protecting Pine Valley, but in truth she nearly created danger where there was none. Her story is a reminder to all of us: don't mistake assumption for fact, and don't let fear drive your decisions. If there's one lesson here, it's this: ask before you accuse, learn before you judge, and listen before you act. In doing so, you not only protect your community, you honor it. So, dear friends watching this story unfold, tell me, have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's rush to judgment caused chaos? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story made you laugh, made you think, or maybe taught you something, hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Because here in Pine Valley, and in our little corner of the internet, the stories never stop, and the lessons are always worth learning.